So, is baking a hobby for you?
I mean, I guess technically, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do enjoy doing it. That's why I do it so frequently. I do enjoy trying new things. Like that's the other piece of it, is that it's as much of it as is repetition, because people are like, oh, do this, do that. A lot of it is like, yeah, but I'm tired of that. Let's do something different. Let's try something new. What about this? So I guess in that way, it is a hobby because it is always challenging and looking for something different.
I think there's crossover in all skill sets, like where it's like baking is a skill that you have and it's a hobby, but then it becomes a chore when it's like, well, just make those blueberry muffins. I want those blueberry muffins again. And you're like, oh, with the blueberry nut muffins. I feel like that about like hemming pants or like sewing badges on a Girl Scout vest, where I'm like, okay, I have the skills to do this.
Right.
This is not a hobby for me. This is not fun. This is like, oh my God, I better get them on there because
a chore.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good point, actually.
That is a good point. Okay. Here's the definition of hobby. An activity done regularly in one's leisure time for pleasure. Leisure time is the part that's throwing me with the hobby. I don't tend to have a lot of leisure time. So I guess one would have to create leisure time in order to have time to have a hobby, right?
Yeah, but I don't
here's
know
the
about
thing,
that.
Leanne. I don't think that Cathy is made of lots of leisure time, and I certainly am not.
No. Well, I think that's why Cathy doesn't think of it as a hobby, is because it's not leisure time.
But I also think, like, if you go back to your 888 book, like that also falls into that category. And I think that's what Kirsten was saying. There's sometimes that overlap where sometimes baking is a chore because I have to feed my family. And sometimes it's fun and creative and it falls into one of those two categories. So sometimes it's hard to see it as always a hobby.
Right.
Because it's not always leisure.
Right. That's a really good point. For those of you listening, long time ago, very early in this podcast, I had read a book about Sleep Revolution by the woman, the Huffington Post.
Ariana Huffington.
Yes, her. Thank you. And she had discovered that before Industrial Revolution, there was a theory in our culture where you should have 8 hours for sleep, 8 hours for work, and 8 hours for whatever you want. And we definitely culturally don't behave that way anymore. So I decided to kind of adjust my thinking about that. I just felt like it was, 6 hours for sleep. The rest of the time was work, instead of going, wait a minute, I do Girl Scouts because I want to. So that's really part of the 8 hours, whatever I want. And some of the stuff with my dogs goes in the 8 hours of whatever I want. And some of it goes into work. And so I guess I had sort of gotten away from that thinking because I got on the hamster wheel of everything, every waking moment practically being work. It was not a hobby to teach 8th grade. That was not for me. That wasn't for me. That was a part of your job. And so was, the myriad of other things that got me overwhelmed. Was a lot of it was really not for me. It was really for work. So that is a really good point, Cathy. I'll have to start readjusting my thinking again back to the 888. Starting with 8 hours of sleep. I might go back to that.